Imagine living in a country where virtually everything you see, hear and read is controlled by a single party. Newspapers, radio programs, television news, everything adheres to the official party line of the state. But what did people really think of the media in the GDR? Let's take a look behind the scenes.
No one has any intention of building a wall.
Neither ox nor donkey can stop the progress of socialism.
I love everyone, all people.
We are the people.
In the GDR, people's expectations of the media were the same as anywhere else in the world, to provide information and entertainment. The day would begin with music on the radio and news from around the world, and end with entertainment programs on television. But the media in the GDR also served another purpose: to communicate the merits of socialism and to educate its citizens through the careful control of information. Walter Ulbricht, leader of the GDR since 1950, explained quite clearly, it must look democratic, but we must be in control of everything.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today, Aktuelle Kamera reports on the opening of the 22nd German Labour Conference in Leipzig.
The Socialist Unity Party of Germany, SED for short, controlled all media content. Journalists were schooled in loyal reporting at the so-called Red Cloister at the University of Leipzig.
The most important thing was to always stick to the party line and do exactly as bidden by the SED and its agitation and propaganda department at the SED Central Committee.
Von der Abteilung Agitation und Propaganda im ZK der SED erwartet wurde.
The newspapers and journalism were not primarily for information, though that was always necessary, otherwise they would have served no purpose. Rather, they were an instrument of power for spreading ideology and propaganda.
Every week, the journalists received instructions on what they could report on and what they could not. Even slight deviations could have serious consequences.
First, the head of department looked at it, then the relevant deputy editor-in-chief. After it had been typeset, there was another late shift that checked through it all again from a political viewpoint. And from time to time, we discovered that if something hadn't turned out quite the way they wanted, someone had checked it and corrected it in the print works.
The ADN, the Allgemeine Deutsche Nachrichtenagentur, the official agency of the GDR, not only provided the written copy, but also the short intros and captions for the various newspapers.
The system of control was so pervasive that the journalists' work often didn't need censoring. They had internalized the censorship guidelines to such an extent that they knew in advance what they were allowed to report on and what not. The Aktuelle Kamera, the main news program in the GDR, is a prime example.
The Aktuelle Kamera reports today on...
Half of the program reported on the activities of the state leadership, on which endless praise was heaped.
The
problems in the GDR were never mentioned. Everything was swept under the carpet. Not a single social problem in the GDR, whether of greater or lesser importance, was discussed publicly.
As the reporting often failed to correspond to what people experienced, many GDR citizens developed a special skill: reading between the lines.
They soon became aware of the finer nuances, the slight differences between what was said before, what was said later, and what was reported on the state's main news program, Aktuelle Kamera. They noticed such things and became attuned to them.
Many GDR citizens turned to Western television or radio for more independent reporting.
In living rooms throughout much of the GDR, people routinely watched the evening news and other political shows on West German television. Only in outlying areas, near Dresden and Greifswald, was that not possible. Everywhere else, people had more or less good reception of West German TV. As such, people did know, they were aware of what was going on.
To curb the consumption of West German television and radio, the state used the party's youth movement, the FDJ. In the early 1960s, as part of the infamous Ochsenkopf campaign, FDJ brigades were sent from house to house to reposition or incapacitate antennas pointing west.
One well-known example was when school children were asked what the clock looked like on TV. As the hands of the clock were different on West German and East German channels, they knew immediately whether someone was watching West German television at home.
The state also produced corrective programs like the Black Channel.
Und Karl Eduard von Schnitzler.
Week after week, Karl Eduard von Schnitzler, who was certainly a quite persuasive propagandist, would systematically dismantle Western media in this program. The editing was typically very selective, and his commentary often rather malicious, biting and ironic, which in general did not go down well with viewers.
What can you see? Are there posters on the streets? Yes, great big ones. Right then, we're back home in the GDR. How nice.
Besides serving propaganda, the GDR media also produced programs for entertainment, quiz shows, crime series such as Polizeiruf 110, as well as children's programs. The intention was that the GDR citizens should not feel the need to stray onto foreign channels, which only worked to a limited extent. In the 1980s, Mikhail Gorbachev's policy of reform in the Soviet Union laid bare the shortcomings of the GDR media. While in the era of glasnost and perestroika, the Soviet media began reporting on previously forbidden topics, such as the crimes under Stalin, in which millions of people were murdered, the SED leadership felt compelled to ban the Soviet magazine Sputnik.
And it was then that they went overboard. For decades, the GDR population had heard that learning from the Soviet Union means learning to win. While that may seem strange to us today, it was a widespread slogan at the time. And now, suddenly, the state felt forced to ban a magazine that came from the Soviet Union.
The GDR, under the leadership of Honecker, made a complete fool of itself in this respect, not least because people were already looking to the West. What were they hoping to achieve?
Of course, that only fueled more outrage and resistance. Some political protests were staged, and it was a catalyst for what was to follow, and that ultimately led to the fall of the wall in 1989.
The state propaganda became increasingly ineffectual. Access to Western media, along with steadily growing dissatisfaction among the population, further weakened the credibility of the GDR media. For many, the situation had reached Orwellian proportions. The novel 1984 was, of course, banned in the GDR, as it was feared its depictions would bear too much similarity to life in the GDR. In the end, even the strictest media controls were unable to stop growing dissatisfaction in the GDR. The desire for truth and freedom is stronger than any propaganda.